Hey there, people! So today I am finally at last bringing you my complete Summoner Loadout guide for Terraria 1.4, including Terraria 1.4.0, 1.4.1, and 1.4.2 onward. Because of course we are dealing for the foreseeable future with different versions on different platforms, PC, mobile, and coming soon to console. So I will be covering the best class builds and class-specific weapons, armor, and accessories for all stages of the game. The differences between versions are mostly minor, although a few significant things, but we'll get to that. In a few places I'll be including some basic stats, crafting ingredients, recipes, or sources. These will be organized around game progression and loadouts for the game's bosses and events. If you want to skip ahead, I've set up chapters with timestamps in the description. So first of all, some general information. Weapons specific to summoners include whips, minions, and sentries. I am not including sentry-focused setups in this video. That's a whole other topic. This will only be covering minion-based summoner loadouts. However, I will mention some of the sentries along the way and some accessories that are related to them, since they do provide some extra offense. Whip modifiers are a trade-off of range versus speed, as well as direct damage. So overall, the best whip modifier is arguably legendary, but you can optimize for something else. For instance, the longest reach would be actually the sluggish modifier, because slower speeds are longer reach for whips. In 1.4.1 onward, you can also now use flasks with whips to inflict additional debuffs, so that's something to keep in mind. The best modifier for most minion summon staffs is Ruthless. There are 3 exceptions, which are all at the beginning of the game. The lowest damage staffs at the beginning of the game, Mythical, actually rounds out to equal damage to Ruthless, and has some other stuff. So again, I will be covering 1.4.0, 1.4.1, and 1.4.2 because for now they're on different platforms. Most of this video will apply in either case, any case, and I'll mention where things are different, which again is not very many places actually, but some of the right at the beginning, so it will be there in a second. As of this recording, as of this moment, mobile is on 1.4.0, PC is on 1.4.2, and consoles will get 1.4.0 soon. Eventually, though, all of the current platforms are expected to get the final updates to 1.4.2 plus. So, moving right along. So early game, this is early pre-hard mode when you're just starting out more or less, your first little while in the game. The initial wood and ore based armor sets are not class specific. In 1.4.1 they finally added new early game summoner gear, so that's now an option. Again, currently at this moment only on PC. It'll be coming to the rest of you later. On 1.4.0 and earlier, since there is no early game summoner specific armor, you'll want to try to get at least silver or tungsten armor. That's sort of your base level, getting ready for some of your boss fights. It is very optional whether you want to go to gold or platinum armor for those non-class specific ones. If you have some spelunker potions, it's a good way of finding that, but you don't really need to get that unless you're really struggling. You may, on 1.4.0 and earlier, need to stick with mixed or other setups, at least until defeating the Queen Bee boss. So, in terms of minions, the Finch staff is available on all 1.4 versions. It is automatically given to Journey Mode characters, and it can also be found in living wood chests beneath the giant living trees. The Finch perches on your head and flies to attack enemies, inflicts a base of 7 summon damage. The Slime Staff is also available from the beginning of the game on all versions, but it is extremely rare. It's ground base and inflicts 8 summon damage. It can be dropped by most slime enemies with an extremely small 1 in 10,000 chance, but Pinky, the tiny pink slime, has a much higher 1 in 100 chance to drop the Slime Staff, so if you really want it, make sure you fight those Pinkies. Also, if you really want it, killing slimes during a slime rain is also a very good bet early on, although that will eventually result in summoning the King Slime boss. You can set up a statue farm later on. You'll need to defeat Skeletron and get into the dungeon before you'll have the gear to be able to set up a statue farm. But if you really want that slime statue, and by then you don't really need it, you can rescue the mechanic from the dungeon and set that up. By then you have better options though. So just if you really want the slime staff. Now, again, 1.4.1, they added the Flink's fur coat and the Flink's staff. So that's both an armor piece and a staff added in 1.4.1, which both make it a lot easier to become a proper dedicated summoner earlier in the game. Both of those are made using Flink's fur, which is only dropped on 1.4.1 onwards. So that's dropped by snowflinks in the underground snow biome. So if you are on one of those versions and you want to become a proper summoner, then head to the snow biome as early as you can, fight some flinkses, and get that stuff. The coat provides one additional minion slot, so you go from your default of 1 minion to 2, and it also boosts your summon damage, your minion damage by 5%. It only takes up the shirt slot, so that makes it kind of interesting. You can use it with any helmet and leggings. So basically, you just want to use the best helmet and leggings that you can obtain in terms of defense or other bonuses. For defense, you can go to gold or platinum if you really want to maximize your defense, whichever one you have available. Although, keep in mind, a tungsten helmet actually is equal in defense to a gold helmet, and you're not going to get the set bonuses for, you know, the ore-based armors anyway if you're wearing the Flink's coat. It also does kind of make for a nice opportunity to mix and match classes and bonuses right from the beginning of the game, so that's kind of neat as well. For instance, you can use fossil armor parts, which have the same defense as the gold armor parts, but they provide ranged critical bonuses, critical strike chance. So if you like ranged weapons, you know, you can slot in fossil armor parts. Also, a very interesting one that I find, the jungle armor parts are an even better option in my opinion, because they have the same defense as the platinum parts. Again, you're not going to get the set bonuses anyway in either case, but if you're just swapping in pieces, the jungle armor pieces have the same defense as platinum, but they give you magic boosts. So that's also something you can get early on if you head deep enough down in the jungle to get your jungle spores and so on. And yeah, that's a really neat one, because that allows you to use magic as well. It gives you some nice magic boosts. Anyway, the Flink staff itself summons a Flink's minion, which inflicts a base 8 summon damage on enemies. So in terms of damage, it's the same as the slime staff. It is also ground-based like the slime, but it will leap into the air to attack airborne targets. I think that's kind of true of both of them, but actually the Flink staff seems to be possibly a little bit better than the slime staff, even though it's much less rare and relatively much easier to obtain. So again, 1.4.1, you definitely want to go with the Flink's gear, Flink's fur coat, and Flink's staff. Excellent options early in the game. For crafting both items, though, you will also need some gold or platinum bars. The coat is crafted from 8 Flink's fur, 10 silk, and 8 gold or platinum bars at a loom. And so you'll need a loom. If you can find those underground, or you can build a sawmill to craft one. The staff is crafted from 6 Flink's fur and 10 gold or platinum bars at a workbench. So you don't even need an anvil for either of these things, except that you might need that to get your sawmill. But anyway, again, any 1.4 version, though, you will also want to get the zoologist NPC, or you will need to go farming deep in the jungle to get a whip, because you can either get a whip from the zoologist or from jungle ingredients. So the zoologist will show up once you have 53 entries, or 10% of your bestiary filled out, which you get basically just by exploring. You get all the different enemies as you find them in your bestiary. Once you get enough, then the zoologist will be available. You will need a house for her to move in. And yeah, so a valid NPC house meeting all the requirements, and then she will show up. She will sell the leather whip, which boosts the attacks of your minions by 4 summon tag damage. It inflicts 14 damage itself directly, and it also has a base of 11 range and 50% multi-hit damage reduction. The way whips work is that it will hit an initial enemy. It will also hit additional enemies, but the additional enemies will receive a little bit less damage. So that damage reduction applies to each additional enemy after the first one. Alternatively to that leather whip from the zoologist, though, so either you can get the leather whip from the zoologist first, or you can go straight for this one, or you can upgrade to this one afterwards, is the Snapthorn. So you need to gather 12 stingers, 3 vines, and 3 jungle spores from deep in the underground jungle, the cavern layer. And you can use those to craft the Snapthorn, which is actually better than the leather whip, and you can craft that at an anvil. It adds 6 summon tag damage to your minion attacks. It inflicts 18 direct damage, plus it also inflicts the poison debuff. There's a chance, it's not every time. But it also has a base of 15 range and a 40% damage reduction for each additional hit. So its damage decrease is less for additional hits after the first enemy. So basically every single stat, it's better. So you definitely will want the Snapthorn whip when you can get it. Moving along again, though. Early bosses. So this kind of applies to both the Eye of Cthulhu and King Slime. You want a pretty similar loadout for the two of them. It doesn't really matter which one you're fighting in terms of the loadout. So again, on 1.4.1 onward, you can do either of these fights as a pure summoner with a Flink's fur coat. Otherwise, and at the same time, even if you are a pure summoner, relying purely on minions and whips may still be a little bit difficult. But if you do get that fur coat and the Flink staff, or even if you want to use one of the other minions, any of your whips, you're definitely going to do okay against them. But you may want to consider mixing classes, mixing with other weapons. It's up to you. Otherwise, though, if you're not on 1.4.1, you'll want to go with silver or tungsten armor again is your sort of base level. If you're really struggling, you can go to gold or platinum. And there are also boosts and bonuses that I'll get to in a second as well that can help you if you are struggling. So again, you can use the Flink staff, you can use the Finch staff, you can use the Slime staff, whatever you have available, really. I would say, though, the Flink staff is going to be the best option. Leather whip will help, of course. Snapthorn is even better, and it's important to use those whips during a boss fight if you can. Some of the bosses are hard to hit, but if you can use those whips against the boss, it's definitely going to help you because it's actually going to boost the damage that your minions do, as well as, you know, encouraging them to attack the boss at the same time. So use the whips. If you don't care about being 100% a summoner, you know, if you want to be a complete summoner, then you need to use your whips and your minions, and that's it. If you don't mind mixing classes, you can use or add, I would say the best bow you can get is probably the best option against these early bosses. Jester's arrows, at the beginning particularly, will cut down the minions, especially Eye of Cthulhu, the first phase. It has 2 phases, whereas Slime King doesn't really. He just shrinks slowly as you beat him up. But the Jester's arrows will cut down on their minions. They do both have minions, both of these bosses. And Frostburn arrows are the best option for damaging the bosses themselves. So Eye of Cthulhu used the Jester's arrows for the first half and Frostburn for the second, for instance. It is actually possible even to get a mini shark before these fights if you're brave and if you're careful. You just need to basically smash a crimson orb, or sorry, a shadow orb or a crimson heart. Smash one of those, you get your first gun. If you have a house, Arms Dealer moves in, you can buy the mini shark. So it's possible to do that, and that's a powerful weapon through basically all of pre-hard mode. You will want, in terms of accessories, general movement accessories are important, like Hermes boots or other fast-running boots. A grappling hook is always good, although it might not be super useful in these fights, but it can be useful. Fledgling wings, if you have them. Balloon, those things that help you jump higher. Bunny mount, if you get that from fishing. Is a good option because it runs fast and jumps high. The bottles, things in bottles, you know, cloud in a bottle, tsunami in a bottle, sandstorm in a bottle, any of those, and or the balloons again. Frog leg helps you actually jump higher and faster as well. So any of those help you with your jumping and dodging. Movement is important in the boss fights, being able to get out of their way. And the Sharktooth Necklace, if you happen to get it from Blood Moons, decreases enemy defense, so it's very helpful against early bosses particularly, although it's really helpful all through pre-hard mode at least. And ideally you want to save up life crystals, because what happens is that the Eye of Cthulhu will automatically start spawning once you hit 200 health. So what I often do is get to 180 health using life crystals and then start saving them at that point until I feel ready to do the boss fight. So you can save up, you know, up to 11 additional life crystals, and that gives you enough that you can kind of use them all at once and get all the way to 400 potentially. So it's, you know, whatever level of health you think you need to take on the bosses. So you can get up to 400 just using life crystals. So I often do 180, wait until I feel ready for the boss fight, and then use all those life crystals at once. Ideally get to 400 before taking on the bosses. So also same thing for goblin armies. They start spawning when you hit 200 as well. Also, the most useful loot item from these two bosses is the Expert or Master Mode only Shield of Cthulhu. So if you're playing in Expert or Master Mode and you defeat the Eye of Cthulhu, you get the Shield of Cthulhu, which is a very useful item, actually through a lot of the game. The slime mount from King Slime can also be quite useful, so that's the biggest one. The Shield of Cthulhu you get every time if you're playing Expert or Master Mode. The slime mount you can get on any difficulty, but it's only a chance, so you might have to fight King Slime a bunch of times if you want it. And the slime mount is actually useful against the Eye of Cthulhu because you can bounce off of it. And same thing with especially the Eater of Worlds, very useful, the slime mount. So you will probably fight a goblin army around the same time because you got to that level of health and they start spawning. So after you've defeated a goblin army, you can find the Goblin Tinkerer, you can buy the Rocket Boots and the Tinkerer's Workshop from the Goblin Tinkerer. Again, you need a house for him to show up, or at least to move in. You can find him, but he'll only move in if you have a house. And once you have the Tinkerer's Workshop, you can start combining accessories. So that's very useful. So next thing. Food and potions. So I said I was going to talk about buffs, and these are actually very useful in the game in general, but specifically for summoners. And if you're playing in Expert or Master Mode, you'll need food, because if you're in Expert or Master Mode, you need to eat food to keep up your speed and your stats. It's actually very important to be basically fed at all times, or at all times that you're trying to do anything important. It actually makes you run faster. It helps your health regeneration, so food is good. And even if you're just on classic or normal mode, food is still helpful. So there are now, since 1.4 came out, any version 1.4, 3 levels of well-fed. So what I would suggest is keep your basic food for regular gameplay and try to go for the medium or the best food for the boss fights. I usually keep the maximum level kind of food, especially you can, if you get golden critters, you can turn that into a golden delight, I think it's called, or something like that. And you can also do, there's a seafood meal, and either of those will give you the maximum one. The golden one just gives it for a long time, and I save those for boss fights because you want your maximum boosts and stats for the boss fights. So in terms of potions though, also Iron Skin, Regeneration, Swiftness, Thorns, Endurance, Rage, or Wrath, depending on your world, and Summoning. So Summoning Potion is very important for summoners. Obviously, it gives you 1 extra minion, and so again, you will want these for boss fights. You don't necessarily need it early on in the game, but as soon as you can get it, you will need to go fishing to be able to make it. It's made from bottled water, moon glow from the jungle, and variegated lardfish, which I think you also catch in the jungle. So fishing is good, and fishing will help you get food. Fishing will help you get ingredients for potions. There are certain specific fish that you need for certain potions. So I'm not going to give all of the recipes here, but just that summoning potion, bottled water, moon glow, variegated lardfish, very important for summoners. But check out my potions guide or the wiki if you want the ingredients for other potions. They're all in there. There's a section in my potions guide specifically on buff potions, so check that out if you like. Potions are useful. Next thing is, do you want to go to B armor or Obsidian armor? Now, at this point in the game on 1.4.0, you are going to probably want to fight Queen Bee to get your B armor, or at least as early in the game as you can. 1.4.0 and earlier, the only pre-hard mode summoner armor is from Queen Bee, the B armor. On 1.4.1 and onward, though, you actually have a choice. So you can either do the same thing, fight Queen Bee, get your B armor, which, I mean, is probably the route I would go, but you can also alternatively go for the Obsidian armor, which on 1.4.1 onward has been changed into another summoner set in pre-hard mode that's available now. And that can be obtained after fighting either the Eater of Worlds or the Brain of Cthulhu, depending whether you have Corruption or Crimson. So the B armor gives you 3 extra minions, where the Obsidian armor only gives you 1 extra minion, but the Obsidian armor provides a larger minion damage boost, slightly higher defense, and most importantly, big bonuses for whips. So the choice is essentially more minions and higher overall minion damage output versus bigger boost for whips. So if you really like whips, you can go to the Obsidian armor. If you prefer to use your minions, B armor is still the best option there. So that's your choice. And generally, otherwise, you know, in previous versions, B armor is the standard go-to summoner option. But if you really like your whips, go Obsidian. Summoners generally will probably want to defeat the Queen Bee as soon as possible, because not only the B armor, but also the Hornet Staff. You can go and fight the Eater of Worlds or Brain of Cthulhu whenever you like as well. Either of these bosses, any of these bosses can be fought with similar equipment, so you can fight either first and get whichever armor set you want. Likewise, you can actually fight Skeletron before Queen Bee, or even before those other bosses, but it's going to be a lot easier to fight Skeletron after fighting Queen Bee or Eater of Worlds, Brain of Cthulhu, especially Queen Bee. The Bee weapons are also very useful against Skeletron. Classic and normal difficulty, you can fight Skeletron fairly easily at this point in the game before fighting the other bosses, but on Expert or Master mode, Skeletron is way, way harder than on Classic, so it's better to wait on Skeletron until you get better gear on those versions, or on those difficulties. So, I'm going to talk about Queen Bee first here, because that's usually the go-to. So you can actually use pretty similar equipment to those earlier boss fights, but you will definitely want as much life as possible. Try to get to 400. Any upgrades you can get to other weapons and accessories, maybe stuff that you didn't have available in those earlier fights. Potions, again, will help. Keep in mind that on 1.4, Queen Bee can become enraged now. That's one change to the boss if you're not close enough to enough jungle blocks. I've actually had this happen even if I'm just trying to fight her above the surface of the jungle. Like, I set up an arena at the surface of the jungle, and she became enraged anyway because I got too high up, essentially. So I actually recommend fighting her underground in one of the hives. Or if you really want, you can carve out a big arena, but usually one of the hives is big enough. Find a big hive and turn it into your arena before killing the larva or summoning her. If you're struggling with Queen Bee on 1.4.1 onward, you can choose to switch your strategy and do the Eater or Brain first and get the Obsidian armor, give you a nice bonus. On any version, you can also get the Imp Staff after defeating either of those bosses. So again, if you're really struggling with Queen Bee, try the other bosses, get the Underworld gear, and try her that way. In terms of loot from the Queen Bee, she drops bee wax, which is used to craft the Hornet Staff and the bee armor set. You'll probably need to defeat her 2 or 3 times to get enough bee wax for the full armor set and the staff. So that's a thing. Of course, you can craft, maybe the staff to start with or whatever. The bee armor is basically your late pre-hard mode summoning set. Again, adds 2 extra minions, so 3 total, and 23% minion damage. So definitely, if you're going with minions being your focus, bee armor. The armor itself is 30 beadwax, the hornet staff is 14 beadwax, and both items are crafted at an anvil. The hornet minion flies, fires stingers at enemies like the hornets you find in the jungle, except it's attacking them instead of you, and it can inflict the poison debuff as well. The hornet itself has actually been buffed since 1.4.1. It inflicts 12 damage if you're on those versions versus only 9 damage on earlier versions. You can... if you get the honeycomb drop, you can upgrade a shark tooth necklace to a stinger necklace. So again, fight those blood moons, try to get that shark tooth necklace, and then you can actually upgrade it, make it even better stinger necklace. And it's actually possible, if you get 2 of them, 2 shark tooth necklaces, you can stack a shark tooth necklace and a stinger necklace and reduce the defense of your enemies even further, which is really great against bosses, especially pre-hard mode, obviously. If you have a valid house available after defeating Queen Bee, the Witch Doctor will then arrive. Since 1.4.1, again, 1.4.1 is really great for summoners. He will actually sell the pygmy necklace at night from the time that you first get him, which is amazing because the pygmy necklace gives you an extra minion. So that used to only be available after Plantera, I believe. So to have it, you know, early on in pre-hard mode potentially, or in the middle of pre-hard mode, it's way earlier in the game, and it's a huge boost for summoners. But again, that's 1.4.1 onwards. He also sells the imbuing station for making flasks, which again, 1.4.1 onward, you can use flasks with whips. So huge, it's a game changer. 1.4.1 made a lot of nice changes for summoners. You can only use 1 flask at a time, though. So at this point in the game, you'll want to go with a flask of poison, which is 1 bottled water, 1 stinger at the imbuing station. Other flasks are also covered in my potions and flasks guide, right? It wasn't just potions, flasks as well, same guide. There's a section there. There are timestamps in that one as well. So yeah, so much good stuff from Queen Bee for summoners is basically the short version. Moving along, the Eater of Worlds or the Brain of Cthulhu. If you haven't yet fought them, if you didn't decide to do those before Queen Bee, you'll now want to defeat them. You will need to defeat these bosses in 1.4, whereas they were sort of optional in earlier versions. Because they changed it, you can't just fish up the Reaver Shark and skip everything. So basically, you will now need to defeat these to progress in the game. Again, you can use pretty similar loadout to the earlier game bosses. If you have defeated the Queen Bee, you can use the bee armor and the hornet staff, which will be way more powerful. Defeating the Queen Bee first will also allow you to use the flasks if you're on 1.4.1 onwards. Again, you have options. You don't have to be a pure summoner, but if you are, obviously playing as a summoner, you will want the leather whip or the snap thorn for any 1.4 version. You can also, though, if you don't mind mixing classes, use the bee weapons. So any of the bee weapons, really, the bee gun, the sword, the bow, bee's knees, any of those will do. And spiky balls actually laid around your arena can help a lot. You will ideally want to set up an arena with some platforms, a few levels of platforms, maybe on stairs if you want to get fancy. And you can actually throw spiky balls around your arena, and that will help against both of these bosses. You get the spiky balls from the Goblin Army. Particularly really useful against the Eater of Worlds, though. You can actually, as the Eater of Worlds comes up out of the ground towards you, you can throw spiky balls at its face, and that actually works hilariously well. It's a really good strategy against the Eater of Worlds. Slime Mount also works well against the Eater of Worlds because you can bounce off of the segments, essentially, and you do damage, and it also saves you if you're on expert or master mode from the spit. It will block the spit, which is great. So that's some strategies for you. And in terms of loot, either of these bosses will give you the materials that you need to craft a stronger pickaxe to mine hellstone in the underworld. Again, 1.4, you can't just get a Reaver Shark. It won't work. You have to get the materials from these bosses, which is why you have to defeat them. And so therefore, you can craft various gear with Demonite or Crimtane, but the pickaxe is most important. So craft that first, and then see what else you want you want to make. In Expert or Master mode, each of these bosses also drops a really powerful accessory, which you should definitely equip. So Worm Scarf from the Eater of Worlds and the Brain of Confusion from the Brain of Cthulhu, both excellent accessories that you may want to use through most of the rest of the game, if not all of it. Definitely equip those. So normally a world will only have either Corruption or Crimson, so you'll just be fighting one or the other. It's Corruption, it's the Eater of Worlds. If you're in Crimson, it's the Brain of Cthulhu. Moving along again. The Underworld. So again, once you've defeated the Eater of Worlds or Brain of Cthulhu, you can craft the pickaxe that you need to mine Hellstone. So it's time to go down to the Underworld, and that's important for summoners because you can get the Imp Staff. It's made from Hellstone bars, which are obtained from Underworld materials. So as soon as you've defeated one of those bosses, ideally, I mean, you can wait if you want to, but the Imp Staff is awesome. So go down to the Underworld as soon as you can. You will need Hellstone, of course, which you can mine with the pickaxe you made after defeating those bosses. You'll also need Obsidian, and Obsidian is found anywhere water meets lava, and if you don't find any, you can just make water pour on lava or vice versa and get Obsidian. I recommend the water on the lava rather than the lava on the water because you need to be able to get in there and mine. So Hellstone, Obsidian, and you'll need a Hellforge, which you find in the Underworld. That's in the picture there. The thing on the right. You'll want to find a Hellforge so that you can create Hellstone bars, Hellstone Obsidian. Imp Staff does 21 base damage. The Imp flies and throws 3 fireballs at a time, which light enemies on fire. So again, Imps are awesome. They, however, cannot attack underwater enemies. So there are still uses for the Hornet Staff. You might want to keep both of them. You can also at this point craft flasks of fire from 1 bottled water and 3 Hellstone at the imbuing station. Again, that's only 1.4.1 onwards. That's going to be very useful to you as a summoner to use with your whips. If you're lucky, you may also find some life force potions in pots in the Underworld, so you'll want to save those. I definitely recommend saving those for boss fights. Life force potions are awesome, and normally otherwise you can only get them in hard mode, but they can be found in pots in the Underworld. So basically they give you, 25% extra life. Amazing for boss fights. And again, since 1.4.1, you might want the Obsidian armor. Again, fewer minions versus more whip damage. That's your trade-off versus the B armor. And with more minions, the B armor overall inflicts greater minion damage, but the Obsidian armor is more whip damage. So that's your choice, but you'll need stuff from the Underworld to craft the Obsidian armor if you want to do that. You will want to craft definitely a molten pickaxe. You don't need to do that right away, but you definitely want to do that before you go into hard mode. So again, Hellstone. Hellstone bars, get your molten pickaxe. It also provides light, so it's very useful. Besides being something you're going to need when you get into hard mode, the light is nice. And it can even light people on fire, I think. Anyway, you may also want to craft one or more of the other weapons that you can get at this point, like maybe a good sword. You can even, there are lots of options. You can go to the jungle or you can go to the Underworld and craft those swords. You can even do the Knight's Edge if you really want to, or something like a good gun or a bow will also be useful if you're willing to mix classes. So, yeah. It's up to you if you want to use other non-summoner weapons, but if you want to, you'll have access to some really good materials by this point in the game. So next thing is Skeletron, and in terms of a loadout, ideally get all of the gear that I've mentioned before taking on Skeletron, everything I've recommended up to this point, especially in Expert or Master mode. I would go probably with the B armor. It's up to you. You can, again, 1.4.1 onward, you can do Obsidian if you want to. The Imp Staff and or the Hornet Staff. Imp Staff is generally more powerful, but I don't think you can light Skeletron on fire. So up to you. The Hornet Staff can be a little more accurate. The Snap Thorn Whip is your best option against Skeletron. And previously mentioned accessories. Again, you're going to want movement accessories, boots. At this point, you can actually make the amphibian boots, which are going to be really useful against bosses. They're not the fastest in terms of speed, but they combine the ability of the frog leg to jump and to take off faster. So that helps you get out of the way of your bosses, and that's going to be really useful throughout most of the rest of the game, actually, if you want to do the amphibian boots. Again, you'll want the stinger necklace and or shark tooth necklace if you have them. You can use both even. And if you're on 1.4.1 onward, I would suggest the Flask of Fire and the Pygmy necklace, both definitely as well. Those will give you, excellent boosts. If you're on expert or master difficulty, you can use the Worm Scarf or the Brain of Confusion, as I mentioned, from the Eater of Worlds or Brain of Cthulhu. Those are very excellent accessories. If you're willing to mix classes, any of the bee's weapons, again, the bee's knees bow with wooden arrows, actually, because that'll turn it into bees. Bee nades are great. If you happen to be, you wouldn't be using that jungle combo I talked about. Yeah, I mean, you could try it if you want, but then you could use the bee gun. But the star cannon actually is another excellent choice. So bee weapons, bee's knees, bee nades are the best choices at this point for a summoner. Star cannon is also excellent. Star cannon is particularly useful when Skeletron does that spinning charge attack, because it's a predictable, you can hit him easily. Other options include the Molten Fury bow from the Underworld. You can actually use that with Frostburn arrows, and you could have gotten the mini shark like long ago by this point, so it's also a good option if you're willing to mix classes. In terms of loot from Skeletron, he doesn't actually drop anything too important for summoners, but since 1.4.1, again, most of the upgrades for summoners in 1.4.1 are pre-hard mode, but since 1.4.1, after defeating Skeletron, there's another whip that you can get at this point, and it is excellent. It's the Spinal Tap, and it is crafted from 90 bones from the dungeon, so that's why you can only craft it after defeating Skeletron, because then you're safe to go down to the dungeon, fight enemies, get bones. 90 bones plus 55 cobwebs at a workbench, get your Spinal Tap. It is an excellent whip, 29 summon damage, direct damage, adds 7 summon tag damage, 18 range, and a very low 15% multi-hit damage reduction, so it's better at hitting multiple enemies as well. Another nice thing you can get at this point on all 1.4 versions is you can craft the Void Vault and the Void Bag, which are very useful after Skeletron. So one last thing for pre-hard mode, the thing that takes you to hard mode, the Wall of Flesh. So your Wall of Flesh loadout is basically the same gear as Skeletron, but then again, 1.4.1 onward, you'll want to swap in that Spinal Tap whip. You can also find the Bewitching table in the dungeon after defeating Skeletron, and so you'll want to set that down, activate the buff from it, and that gives you another extra minion as well. So theoretically, by this point, you can get 2 extra minions, one from the Bewitching table, one from the Summoning Potion, in addition to the ones provided by your armor. And even, again, 1.4.1, the Pygmy necklace, so you can actually have a lot of minions at this point. You can also buy the Bewitching table in hard mode from the Witch Doctor once you have the Wizard NPC, but that's an aside. You probably want to go exploring the dungeon and try to get the Bewitching table as soon as you can. Again, just like Skeletron, bees and the Star Cannon are really great if you're willing to mix classes. Particularly at the end of the Wall of Flesh fight on expert or master mode, the Wall of Flesh starts speeding up as you damage it. As it gets close to being defeated, it speeds up and gets really very fast. So the bees and the Star Cannon are a great way of dealing with that. And so I like to save bee nades and Star Cannon, I guess maybe the bee's knees bow potentially as well, for that point. Of course, wood arrows are cheap. You could use that the whole time. But anyway, yeah, that's basically a nice strategy for defeating the Wall of Flesh. And in terms of loot from the Wall of Flesh, the most likely summoner-specific drop is, or the most important, rather, summoner-specific drop is the Summoner Emblem. So if you don't get the Summoner Emblem from the Wall of Flesh, you will likely want to farm or fight the Wall of Flesh more times until you do get that summoner emblem, because it gives you 15% boosted summon damage, which is a nice boost to your minions and what they're doing to your enemies. You can also get the Firecracker Whip from the Wall of Flesh, which is kind of more powerful, creates powerful explosions the next time an enemy is hit by a minion. It's a base of 40 summon damage, so your base damage on the whip is much higher, but it has no summon tag damage versus the +7 from that Spinal Tap. So it's actually arguable which one's better. It depends on the situation. It has a 21 base range and 34% multi-hit damage reduction. So again, Spinal Tap actually has a much lower damage reduction, which means more damage to multiple enemies. So that basically means that the Firecracker Whip is better if you have high damage minions, but the Spinal Tap is better with weaker rapid attack minions. So again, that's a 1.4.1 issue. The Wall of Flesh can also drop a few other useful items, such as the Clockwork Assault Rifle, which is a ranged weapon, again, if you don't mind mixing classes. On Expert or Master difficulty, you'll also get the Demon Heart, which you should definitely use right away. It's a one-time use accessory, gives you an extra accessory slot, and you're going to want all those accessory slots that you can get. Alright, so then we're on to hard mode. So early hard mode is kind of like starting over. It's kind of like the beginning of the game. You got a lot of stuff that you need to do before you can really get going. So likewise, actually, most hard mode ore-based armors do not have summoner headgear options, so you need to look elsewhere. You'll want the spider armor, probably. That's the main go-to. It's +3 minions and 30% added minion damage. It's made from 36 spider fangs at an anvil. You'll get those spider fangs from black recluses, which are a new hard mode enemy that you find in underground spider nests. So it's easiest to, maybe you just go near a spider nest and spawn your minions in there and let the minions do the work of fighting the spiders. Just a little tip there. Your other option, though, is Forbidden Armor, which actually boosts both magic and summons. So it's sort of similar to how the Frost Armor works by combining melee and ranged. The Forbidden Armor combines magic and summons. And it's sort of like that, little jungle gear trick that I told you at the beginning of all this as well. So a Forbidden Armor gives you +2 minions, so one less than the Spider Armor, but it gives you +80 mana, and it gives you a boost of 15% to both magic and summon damage, so less for your minions, but gives you some magic boost as well. And it also gives you an Ancient Storm ability, the Forbidden Sign as well. So it is made from 3 forbidden fragments. You'll need to fight sand elementals to get that, which is not that easy. So, if you really want to do it, you can do that. 3 forbidden fragments from sand elementals plus 46 adamantite or titanium bars at a mithril or orichalcum anvil. So it's mixing classes, and it's also a lot harder to get. So I'd probably go spider, but that's your choice. In terms of weapons in early hard mode, you'll want the spider staff, definitely. 16 of those spider fangs at an anvil. 26 base damage. They're ground based, but they jump quite high. They climb background walls, and they can fly to catch up to you. They will latch onto enemies to inflict continual damage and can also inflict the venom debuff. So they're pretty nice. They're definitely better than your pre-hard mode stuff. You can also get the Queen Spider Staff, which is a sentry. It fires short-range spider eggs, which hatch baby spiders to attack enemies. It does not affect your minion cap or total. Its sentries are counted separately from minions. You get one by default, just like you get one minion by default. Your armor sets don't give you boosts to both. There are dedicated armor sets from the Old One's Army event if you really want to get into sentries, but again, not really talking about that here. So the Queen Spider can actually be placed anywhere on the screen, lasts 2 minutes, and comes from 24 spider fangs at an anvil. I'd say focus on getting your spider staff first. The Queen Spider Staff is a kind of a little bonus. So get your armor, get your spider staff, and if you really want to, you can get the queen spider staff as well. You can also get the cool whip from the beginning of hard mode, which kind of like the forbidden armor is sort of hard to get, requires obtaining a frost core drop from an ice golem. So that's somewhat rare, but if you do get it, it has a base of 50 summon damage. Again, like the Firecracker, it has no summon tag boost, so no summon tag damage. It has a 23 base range and a 30% multi-hit damage reduction. But what it does have is a little like frost, like a snowflake that flies around and hits enemies and ignores defense. So that actually is very useful. It's a neat little thing, and if you happen to get a frost core, or if you really want to get it, it does have a much higher base whip damage, and that snowflake actually does a lot of damage, so that's pretty useful as well. It's crafted again for 1 frost core and 8 souls of light, and also 8 souls of night at a hard mode mithril or orichalcum anvil. Also, it is possible to get the pirate staff at this point. It's very rare. But you get it from fighting pirate invasions. You can get it from either the pirates or more likely from the Flying Dutchman. It's a higher chance from the Flying Dutchman. It summons pirate minions, and they are ground-based, but they are pretty powerful. They do a base of 40 summon damage, and of course that's all affected by your boosts. Your base damage is boosted by all your accessories and armor and so on. So pirate staff is very, very good if you get it. Basically high damage, and it's going to be a lot of fun if you're just running around. The fact that they're ground-based makes them a little bit limited against bosses, but very good against most regular enemies you're going to come across. And under the right circumstances, they can be very powerful against bosses as well. In terms of accessories, again, you're going to want that summoner emblem, so keep fighting the wall of flesh until you get it. Definitely equip that. That's going to give a big boost to your minions. Once you have wings, you may want to swap out your boots for a damage boosting or defensive accessory, potentially. You can consider that. You should always reforge your accessories at the Goblin Tinkerer as well. Try to go for menacing if you want to maximize your damage output. If you're really good at dodging, or more likely for the rest of us, you'll want to go for warding to boost your defense as much as possible to keep you alive. If you are in a Crimson world, you may also want to get an Ichor-based weapon, or on 1.4.1 onward, you can then actually craft a flask of Ichor to use it with your whips. So if you need an Ichor weapon, the Golden Shower is a good option, but there are various ones. Ichor is most important when taking on bosses or other strong enemies. For Corruption worlds, the Cursed Inferno was buffed in 1.4 and was buffed again, even more so, in 1.4.1. So the Cursed Inferno is more useful than it used to be as well if you're in a Corruption world. In terms of bosses at this point, so you may encounter the mechanical bosses, but ideally you probably want to fight Queen Slime and or Dreadnautilus before that. Both of them are actually optional bosses. You don't have to fight them, but they are very useful to fight. And the order that you fight them in kind of depends on whether you're on 1.4.0 or 1.4.1, arguably. So if you're on 1.4.0, you can get the Blade Staff before Queen Slime, whereas on 1.4.1, the Blade Staff is dropped by Queen Slime. So you'll have to consider that. The Blade Staff is very useful against Queen Slime. It's also very useful against Dreadnautilus. Of course, you can't use it against Queen Slime on 1.4.1 onwards because she's the one that drops it, unless you've defeated her already. So if you're on 1.4.0, I would actually suggest maybe fighting the Dreadnautilus first. If you're on 1.4.1 or later, you'll probably want to fight Queen Slime first. So the loadout for Queen Slime is, again, Spider Armor is recommended. Forbidden Armor is an alternative if you like magic. Spider Staff is good against her. The Sanguine Staff from Dreadnautilus is better if you're able to defeat Dreadnautilus first. Pirate Staff may actually be best if you were lucky enough to get it. It's the highest damage output, but again, they may have trouble hitting her because she does fly around, so Sanguine Staff is ideal. But on 1.4.0, another option is to get the Blade Staff from Enchanted Swords. They're the ones that drop it on 1.4.0. And then you can maximize the Blade Staff's damage output with whips, accessories, and other buffs, and that'll actually be very good against her as well. So the Queen Spider Staff can also help, particularly with her minions. You can place this Queen Spider somewhere and fire those little spiders, take out the minions. The Spinal Tap is actually still a good whip for this fight, even though, and even actually the old Snapthorn can still boost your minions a bit. The Cool Whip will also help to clear out her minions if you did get it, or if you can get it. If you happen to fight the mechanical bosses, or even one of them first, you can use the Durandal Whip. So any of those whip options actually can be useful, as Snapthorn is obviously the weakest of those four. So Spinal Tap is kind of the go-to on 1.4.1. Onward, Cool Whip if you were able to get it, lucky enough to get it. Durandal if you happen to fight a mechanical boss first, it's going to be better. Since 1.4.1, again, Flask of Ichor or Cursed Flames will also help if you're whipping her. If you want to mix classes, add other weapon types, the Sergeant United Shield is a good option to clear out the minions specifically, less so against the boss herself. The Shadow Flame Knife also works. A good yo-yo is a good option. Dart Pistol or Dart Rifle with crystal darts particularly works well. Daedalus Stormbow with holy arrows still works. Onyx Blaster with crystal bullets is also a good option. If you are using Forbidden Armor, then you can use the magic, you can use Life Drain and or the Meteor Staff, good options as well. In terms of moving around, you can either use a fast mount on good terrain, or it's actually very good to have a long runway and smooth out the terrain so that you can run fast, and that can actually be a good option for fighting against her. A combination of wings and boots is your alternative kind of thing. The best wings at this point are the Fairy, Fin, Frozen, or Harpy wings. Any of those, they're equivalent. Again, amphibian boots can help to boost your flight, gives you a takeoff, although lightning or frost spark or terra spark boots are faster on the ground, but the amphibian boots are better for taking off quickly. The Summoner Emblem is more or less essential for a solid boost to your damage output. Other good accessories include the Cobalt Shield, so you don't get knocked around. Frozen Turtle Shell will save you some damage. Cross Necklace or Star Veil is a great option at this point. The Band of Regeneration or the Charm of Myths, very helpful. Particularly Charm of Myths cuts down your potion, heal potion time. The Putrid Scent or even the Shark Tooth or Stinger necklaces, if you got a spare slot, those can be helpful as well. If you are using other weapon types, the Yo-Yo Bag if you're using yo-yos, or the Magic Quiver for arrow-based weapons are useful. If you're playing Expert or Master difficulty, the Brain of Confusion, the Worm Scarf, and the Shield of Cthulhu, all of those, any of those, very helpful in terms of accessories as well. And don't forget your food, potions, flasks, and the Bewitching Table to all give you major boosts. Again, that Summoner Potion as well. So in terms of loot from Queen Slime, since 1.4.1, she drops the Blade Staff. 1.4.0, you get it from Enchanted Swords. It's despite its low damage, it can be very useful. It requires optimization. You want to maximize all your damage boosts, and also do as much as you can to reduce your enemy defense, particularly bosses. You know, again, Ichor. Even those necklaces can help with that. And also including your whips for summon tag damage. That's going to make a big difference with the Blade Staff, because those summon tag damages increase the damage that the Blade Staff does, and because it ignores a certain amount of defense, actually, the more you can increase that damage, the better off you're going to be. So she also drops the Gelatinous Pillion, and the Wing Slime mount summoned by that item can also be very useful, actually very good option for taking on other bosses with the Wing Slime mount. So next thing, the Dreadnautilus. So the Dreadnautilus is summoned by fishing during a hard mode Blood Moon. I'm not clear on whether you have to fish in the ocean or if you can fish it up anywhere, but sonar potions can be very helpful to help you know when it's going to be fished up and avoid bad catches that you don't want to take on. So look up those sonar potions or get them from the angler. And that way you can just pull the reel in when you've got the thing you want, in this case, if you want to fight the Dreadnautilus. So the Dreadnautilus can be summoned at any time in hard mode and is totally optional, just like Queen Slime, but has a nice drop for summoners. So 1.4.0, again, you might want to consider fighting Dreadnautilus before Queen Slime. 1.4.1 onwards. Afterwards is better because that Blade Staff is actually very useful against the Dreadnautilus. So you'll want that Spider Armor. By default is your go-to. Forbidden Armor if you want a hybrid with magic. Blade Staff ignores actually the Dreadnautilus's entire defense, so that's why you kind of want to wait until you have the Blade Staff ideally to take on the Dreadnautilus, and why you can do it earlier on 1.4.0 and after Queen Slime on 1.4.1. You can, of course, also use the Spider Staff or Pirate Staff if that's what you have available or if that's your preference. Accessories and buffs, again, mostly around movement and damage or minion boosting, mostly the same stuff. If you are using the Blade Staff, the Spinal Tap Whip is actually a very good option for this fight because it gives those blades an additional 7 summon tag damage. Firecracker or Cool Whip can also work pretty well, and actually the Cool Whip's little snowflake thing will ignore the defense as well. The Durandal, actually, again, if you end up fighting the Dreadnautilus after the mechanical bosses or after one of them, and you can craft the Durandal first, that's going to be even better. So in terms of loot from the Dreadnautilus, the main reason that you're taking on the Dreadnautilus as a summoner is to obtain the Sanguine Staff, which is a very powerful minion staff in the earlier part of hard mode. It's actually a very good option for a minion. You may need to fight the Dreadnautilus multiple times, however, to get it, because it's only a chance to drop it. So you definitely, that Sanguine Staff is highly recommended from the Dreadnautilus. So next up is the mechanical bosses, and again, much of the loadout is going to be the same, especially particularly for the first mechanical boss, whichever one you end up taking on first. Spider Armor and is the go-to. Forbidden Armor is the option. The Blade Staff can still be useful if optimized well, particularly against the Destroyer with its multiple segments and I think lower defense, if I recall. Blade Staff is actually a good option if you optimize it well. The Spider Staff is also a fine option. You can take on the mechanical bosses with the Spider Staff just fine. Sanguine Staff is going to be better, though, than the Spider Staff, and the Pirate Staff can work as well, especially against the Destroyer, because the Destroyer is going in and out of the ground, so the Pirates are on the ground anyway, and they're going to do the most damage. So that becomes a good option as well. Any of those can work. The Cool Whip will generally be the best whip available, actually, although the Firecracker and Spinal Tap can work as well. Again, it depends on your strategy. If you're using the Blade Staff, you'll want to use the Spinal Tap, and when you can get the Durandal, even better, because that's going to boost those Blade minions the most. Otherwise, Cool Whip is excellent with its little snowflake and its extra damage and so on. Other options that pierce or are good at hitting multiple targets will work best if you're mixing classes, mixing weapons, especially against the Destroyer. So against the Destroyer, you want piercing weapons or multiple target weapons that can hit multiple segments, whereas against the Skeletron Prime or the Twins, you'll want to optimize for single target damage, so different weapons depending on your which boss you're fighting and your goal there. The Gelatinous Pillion, again, that you get from Queen Slime, the Winged Slime mount, is an excellent movement option and also allows you to save a couple slots in terms of wings and boots, so you can swap in a couple other boosts. But that's your choice. Winged Slime mount or wings and boots, basically. So in terms of loot from the mechanical bosses, once you have 54 hallowed bars, which is going to involve more than one of them being defeated, but once you have 54 hallowed bars, you can optionally craft the Hallowed Armor, because the Hallowed Armor in 1.4 now has a summoner headgear set, whereas it did not earlier. The bonuses are not as strong as the Spider Armor, but it has better survivability because the Hallowed Armor has higher defense and it has the Holy Protection damage avoidance buff. So it's lower damage output than the spider armor, but it's you're more likely to live, essentially. You can also craft the Durandal Whip again, 12 hallowed bars to craft that. It has rapid attack speed, 55 direct base summon damage, plus 9 summon tag damage, and that's what makes it better than the earlier ones. Boosts your minions the most, has a 24 base range, and a relatively low 20% damage reduction for each additional hit, so that's closer to the Spinal Tap in terms of that damage reduction as well. So you can also, in terms of other things you might want to use, well, the Optic Staff is your one summoner specific drop, which comes from the twins. You need to defeat the twins, and they give you some of the ingredients, and then you can craft the Optic Staff. It summons a miniature version of the twins, 1 pair for each minion slot. They fly around. One does melee charging attacks, and the other attacks with a laser, much like the twins themselves. It does 30 base damage, but it's kind of a 2-for-1 because each slot you get the 2, you get the pair. So you can summon quite a swarm of miniature twins, but because of the way piercing works, they actually can all only hit 6 times per second. I'm trying to recall if they may have done a little patch for that in one of the updates, but yeah, they're not necessarily actually the best option. They can be good. It depends on the circumstance. So the Optic Staff is an option. If you're willing to mix weapons classes, you can also craft the Mega Shark after defeating the Destroyer, which is an excellent gun. After defeating all 3 of the mechanical bosses, you can also craft the Avenger emblem if you want to. It gives you a 12% boost to all damage. So if you're mixing classes, that's going to be good. If you're summoner specific, stick to your summoner emblem. It's going to give you a bigger boost for your summon damage specifically. Also, it's worth noting, after defeating any one of the mechanical bosses, you have the option of fighting tier 2 of the old one's army. And if you're into sentries, that's an excellent thing to do. The ogre can drop any one of 4 different accessories, which give you a +1 sentry. And also, they are secondarily useful because those accessories also give you a 10% summon damage boost, which applies to your minions as well. So if you have an extra slot and maybe you like sentries, it's worth getting one of those. So that's the Apprentice's Scarf, the Squire's Shield, Huntress's Buckler, or the Monk's Belt, any one of those, but you can only use one at a time. They do not stack. So again, Sentry Cap is separate from Minion Cap. Without those boosts, you can only use 1 sentry at a time. So that'll give you an extra sentry, extra damage to all of your summon weapons. So next thing up is Plantera. So the loadout for Plantera, you're going to want to go with either Hallowed or Spidered armor. So Spider's going to give you more damage output. Hallow's going to help you survive. So that's your choice. I'd personally go with the Hallow because I'm not that great at dodging stuff, but the Sanguine Staff at this point remains the best overall option for minions. If you optimize everything well, the Blade Staff can also work well. You can get away with the Optic Staff or the Spider Staff. They will still work if you don't have those other ones. The Durandal is the best whip option because it's going to boost your minions the most, although whipping Plantera may be a bit challenging. Accessories and boosts, again, remain mostly the same as for the earlier fights. So hopefully by now you may have picked up some of the items that maybe weren't as easily available earlier. You know, all the ones I talked about. You've got options to upgrade wings and things. You can get the potentially the Ankh Shield at this point. You'll want either a Bezoar or one of its derivatives, ideally all the way to the Ankh Shield. That will prevent you from being poisoned by Plantera. So that's actually, it's mostly this boss fight that you're going to use that with in terms of boss fights, but it's very helpful not to be poisoned. The Avenger emblem and or one of those old ones army accessories can help. So those are the changes from earlier things. Again, boots and or wings. Mounts might not work too well for this fight. You're going to want your Summoner emblem. Starveil's good, Charm of Myths, so on, you know, things I talked about earlier. So yeah, you can, the one alternative you have to wings and boots is to use a minecart track. Again, mounts in the underground jungle, probably not going to work great. Maybe if you carve out a space and design your arena just so, you could probably get away with a mount, swap out your wings and boots. But another alternative is to use a minecart track or something. In terms of non-summoner weapons for this fight, if you're mixing classes, the Mega Shark, the Uzi, or another good distance weapon is going to be a good option. You generally want to stay a little ways away from the plant that's trying to eat you. So Plantera, in terms of loot, will drop the Pygmy Staff, which is very useful. It's a 1 in 4 chance, though, that she'll drop it in Classic or Normal, and it's a 1 in 2 in Expert or Master, so you may not get it every time. You may need to fight Plantera more than once. The Pygmy Staff is pretty good. It's ground-based. The Pygmies that it summons are ground-based, but they do throw spears, so they can still attack aerial targets that way. They do 34 base damage. You will want it regardless because, so again, you may need to fight Plantera multiple times because you need that Pygmy Staff in order to purchase certain other summoning items from the Witch Doctor. So you want to get the Pygmy Staff whether you plan to use it or not. On 1.4.0, this is when you can finally get that Pygmy Necklace, which gives you an extra minion. Witch Doctor sells it at night only if you have the Pygmy Staff and have defeated Plantera. Also, the Hercules Beetle, 15% damage boost, so that matches your Summoner Emblem on the damage boost, but it also actually boosts your minion's knockback, so it's better than your Summoner Emblem. And the Witch Doctor sells that in the jungle if you have the staff, the Pygmy Staff, and have defeated Plantera. And also the Tiki Armor. Again, you need to have that Pygmy Staff to be able to get the Tiki Armor. It gives you +4 minions, 30% minion damage boost, and the Witch Doctor only sells that if you have the staff and have defeated Plantera. All 3 of those, so get that staff. Also at this point, after defeating Plantera, it's possible if you got a Frost Key to get the Staff of the Frost Hydra, which is going to be really useful because it's a very powerful sentry. Again, sentries are counted separately from minions, so you can always have at least one. And at the same time, they're the same damage type, so they're boosted by all of your summoner damage boosts. Staff of the Frost Hydra has 100 base damage, remains in place for 2 minutes or until you recast it, and you can cast it, anywhere on the screen kind of thing. And it is obtained from the frozen chest in the dungeon after defeating Plantera. Requires a frozen key. It's also a good idea at this point after defeating Plantera to farm the Bone Lee enemies in the dungeon to get the Tabby and the Black Belt to craft your Master Ninja gear. You'll combine the Tabby and the Black Belt with Tiger Climbing gear, which itself is crafted from combining Shoe Spikes and Climbing Claws, and all of that at a Tinkerer's Workshop. And yeah, Master Ninja gear is very useful, incredible for the rest of the game, so that's an important accessory. You can also get, while you're at it, the Morningstar Whip from the dungeon at this point, which it does 180 base summon damage. It's just massive damage. Slightly lower, though, +5 summon tag damage for your minions. On 1.4.1, they actually boosted a little bit. The range is 28. The damage for additional hits is reduced by only 5%, so it's great for hitting multiple enemies on 1.4.1 onwards, but on 1.4.0, the range is a little bit less, and the damage reduction is much higher at 25%, so on 1.4.0, it's not as useful for hitting multiple enemies, but it's still a good whip, does a lot of damage. You can also, after defeating Plantera, and you'll have solar eclipses happening, if you defeat Deadly Spheres, you have a chance of getting the Deadly Sphere Staff, and that summons a Flying Deadly Sphere minion, which charges at enemies, flies around, does 50 base damage, and again, solar eclipses, Deadly Spheres, that's where you'll drop that. It's a chance, I believe. So you might have to fight a few of them, but it's a good minion option, good sentry, or minion staff. Okay, moving along. The moons, the Pumpkin Moon and the Frost Moon. The Frost Moon actually as a summoner is not that important to you, but the Pumpkin Moon is very important for summoners, so you'll definitely want to do that Pumpkin Moon first, and ideally as soon as you can. Even if you can't defeat the event, there's stuff that you will get just fighting it that's going to be very useful for you as a summoner. So Frost Moon is more optional. If you want some mixed class weapons, then you might want to fight the Frost Moon, but Pumpkin Moon is more or less essential. So your loadout for the Frost Moon is your Tiki Armor. You'll want that. That's your best option. and the Pygmy Staff or the Deadly Sphere minions. Either one of those will be good options. If you decide to take it on a bit later, if you happen to, fight Martian Madness, you can use the Xeno Staff if you get it, and the Tempest Staff from Duke Fishron is also a better option as well. Xeno Staff is excellent. We'll get to that. Accessories, though, will mostly stay the same, but of course you can definitely get the Pygmy Necklace at this point, and the Hercules Beetle is highly, highly recommended at this point as well. Master Ninja Gear, if you got that, definitely highly recommended for most of the rest of the game, really. And the Morning Star Whip is great if you got that. If not, the Durandal can still work well. It boosts your minions a little more, at least until you get the Dark Harvest from the Pumpkin. So Dark Harvest Whip is dropped by Pumpkin. Like most things from the moon enemies, it's somewhat of a low chance. It gets better the further along you get in the event. So for these events, you'll want a good arena. I recommend building a good arena using traps from the Jungle Temple, and use a lava moat, which can help quite a lot. You can have a little lava moat at the bottom, platform above it with traps, spiky balls dropping on them, set it up to a timer. That's my basic strategy. Helps quite a lot during these events. The Staff of the Frost Hydra, as mentioned, is also an excellent bonus damage option. You can just place that down and it's going to shoot at your enemies. So in terms of loot, why are you fighting the Pumpkin Moon particularly? The Spooky Armor gives you +4 minion capacity and a total of 58% increased minion damage. So very, very good set of armor, and that's why you want to fight the Pumpkin Moon. So Spooky Armor is crafted by using a total of 750 spooky wood from the Pumpkin Moon at a workbench. So even if you struggle with the event, do it anyway, and you'll be collecting spooky wood, and eventually you'll get your armor, even if you're not really doing well against the event. Just fight it anyway. Now, if you're doing a little bit better and defeating some of the bosses, you can also get the Raven Staff. It is dropped by Pumpkin during the Pumpkin Moon. It summons a Raven minion, which flies at and attacks enemies, 55 base damage. And it's actually better since it was boosted in 1.4. It was an okay staff before 1.4, but the speed and damage were boosted in 1.4, so it's better than it used to be. The Necromantic Scroll is another one that you can get. It gives you +1 minion capacity and 10% increased minion damage, so excellent accessory as well. It's dropped by the Morning Wood boss in the Pumpkin Moon. And also you can then craft the Papyrus Scarab by combining the Hercules Beetle from the Witch Doctor and the Necromantic Scroll from the Pumpkin Moon. You can combine those into the Papyrus Scarab, which gives you an additional +1 minion capacity and 15% minion damage, so it's a little higher than the Necromantic Scroll there, and it also increases the minion knockback like the Hercules Beetle. So you can basically obviously combine the effects of the Hercules Beetle and Necromantic Scroll, +1 minion, 15% minion damage boost, increased minion knockback, and not only that, but you can also stack that with a Necromantic Scroll as well. So you can actually, if you fight the event enough to get a couple of Necromantic Scrolls, turn one of them into a Papyrus Scarab, keep the other one as well if you like, and huge boost there. Again, you can also get the Dark Harvest Whip from the Pumpkin, and that has a base of 100 summon damage, and has an interesting special dark energy effect that damages other enemies near the one that you hit with the whip. So on 1.4.1, it has a 28 range and a small 10% damage reduction for additional hits, but on 1.4.0 the range is a little less and the damage reduction is much higher, 30%. So both of those most recent whips kind of boosted on 1.4.1 onward. Also, while we're talking about drops, although it's not summoner specific, the expert or master mode only Witch's Broom mount is quite good as well. It's an excellent mount option. So in terms of the Frost Moon, again, very optional, but you can use some of the gear that you fought, some of the gear that you crafted or got from the Pumpkin Moon to take on the Frost Moon. That's going to give you some useful boosts there. So definitely Frost Moon, at least after the Pumpkin Moon, if you choose to take it on. You can even leave it for later on in the game. You don't need to fight it at all. In fact, it doesn't provide any important summoner gear, but you do get a number of good non-summoner weapons if you're mixing classes from the Frost Moon. For example, the Chain Gun, the North Pole, and the Snowman Cannon, all quite useful drops from the Frost Moon if you do choose to take it on. So moving along, we'll definitely need to fight the Golem. So the loadout for the Golem, Spooky Armor is the best option if you have it, Tiki Armor if you don't. Again, I do recommend definitely fighting the Pumpkin Moon first. Get that Spooky Armor as soon as you can. That's gonna carry you for a lot of the rest of the game. Actually, all of it. So you can also get the Desert Tiger Staff from the dungeon if you got a Desert Key. And that's an excellent choice against the Golem if you're able to get that. The Raven Staff from the Pumpkin Moon, the Deadly Spheres, or the Pygmy Staff can all also work against the Golem. Either the Dark Harvest Whip from the Pumpkin Moon or the Morning Star from the dungeon, either of those whips can be very effective. Staff of the Frost Hydra continues to help considerably. Most accessories remain the same. Definitely add that Papyrus Scarab if you got it. And again, actually it stacks with both the Necromantic Scroll and the Hercules Beetle if you got a lot of slots around, and you know, those are things you can get. And Hercules Beetle is better than your Summoner Emblem, but of course, as many slots as you have available, slot in as many minion and damage boosting things as you can. If you are mixing class weapons, the Death Sickle is actually very good against Golem. The Vampire Knives will help you with, you know, surviving. The Mega Shark, the Uzi, the Pulse Bow, the Piranha Gun, all good weapon options. In terms of loot from Golem, he has a chance to drop the Eye of the Golem, which can be combined into the Destroyer Emblem, which gives you 10% damage and 8% critical strike. As a summoner, that's actually not that important because that crit boost does not apply to your minions, so I wouldn't worry too much about that as a summoner, but it's an important drop for other stuff. If you're mixing classes, it might be useful. Golem can also drop the Sunstone, which can be combined with some earlier items into the Celestial Stone and eventually the Celestial Shell. Celestial Shell is an excellent item for all classes. It's plus 10% damage, all damage types, plus 4 defense. It helps your health point regeneration. It gives you, it actually does give you a 50% minion knockback. Is that right? I don't know. That's what I have in my notes. Again, yeah, I guess minions do have knockback. But anyway, yeah, Celestial Stone is from the Sunstone and the Moonstone. The Moon Shell and the Moon Charm create the Neptune's Shell, and then you combine the Celestial Stone and the the Moon Shell is from the Moon Charm and the Neptune's Shell. So you combine the Moon Shell with the Celestial Stone, you get the Celestial Shell. All that's at a Tinkerer's Workshop, and that is very, very useful accessory that you can get after Golem. So next thing that I would do after Golem is take on the Martian Madness if you think you're up to it. And you can either do this event or Duke Fishron, depending which you find easier at this point. Both of these are optionals. You can skip them completely. Each of them drops a new minion staff. The staff from the Martian Madness event is the best one at this point in the game. So in terms of your loadout, definitely you want that Spooky Armor if possible. The Raven Staff or the Deadly Sphere are probably the best minion options. If you did fight Duke Fishron first, you can use the Tempest Staff as well, potentially. The Staff of the Frost Hydra is still very useful to help clear out enemies. If you are mixing classes, the Chain Gun with Crystal Bullets or Chlorophyte Bullets is an excellent option. The Mega Shark or the Uzi can also work. The Flareon from Duke Fishron, the Tsunami from Duke Fishron. Vampire Knives can be useful for surviving. Snowman Cannon's a good option. Chlorophyte Shot Bow or the Piranha Gun, still a good option here as well. I find the Piranha Gun pretty useful against those Martian saucers personally. Accessories mostly the same. Master Ninja Gear is very helpful to dodge the saucer's beam. You can do a quick dodge, and also it gives you a chance to not be damaged. And again, since this fight happens after Golem, you can get that Celestial Shell. Celestial Shell is going to be a big boost. Since the drops are mainly from the Martian Saucer, using an arena well above the ground or a fast flying mount can be very helpful because that will help you spawn saucers more exclusively and concentrate on them and avoid those other enemies that are mostly down on the ground. The saucers are very difficult, but it is possible to sort of time dodging under the beam when it stops. So yeah, if you focus on your timing, it makes it a lot easier to beat those saucers. But yeah, they are a very difficult enemy, especially since in 1.4 that beam goes through blocks now, so you can't just hide under like a ceiling like you used to be able to, which used to make them very easy, but they're not anymore. So anyway, the main loot that you're going for from the Martian Madness is the Xeno Staff. It summons a UFO minion which chases enemies. The UFOs actually teleport and zap enemies with lasers, so they do a lower 36 base damage, but they fire and teleport very rapidly and they never miss, so they are very, very effective. Again, dropped by the Martian Saucer during the event. It's not every time, it's a chance, so it might take defeating a bunch of Martian Saucers. So that's the only summoner specific item, but some of the other weapons and mounts from the event can also be quite useful. The Brain Scrambler summons the Skutlix mount, can be useful for some situations. The Cosmic Car Key summons the UFO mount, can be very nice as well. That's a flying one. The Skutlix is ground based but fires lasers. Also the Xenopopper gun, very powerful weapon. You can combine it with, I like Chlorophyte bullets because it fires multiple. It's like a space shotgun, and it has a delay, so it's kind of hard to aim. So I like Chlorophyte bullets. Does a lot of damage that way. But crystal bullets, if you really can manage to aim it and want to do a lot of damage. The Influx Waver is a good sword, and the Anti-Gravity Hook is a nice drop as well. I like that against Duke Fishron. So speaking of Duke Fishron, you can technically fight Duke Fishron anytime after defeating the Wall of Flesh, but he is a very difficult boss, so I would normally fight him around this stage of the game. He's completely optional. You don't really have to fight him at all. He doesn't do a lot for summoners. He does have one staff that he drops. In terms of a loadout, Spooky Armor is, again, your best option. The Xeno Staff, if you got it from the Martian Madness, is going to be very helpful because it moves and attacks rapidly, and he moves and attacks rapidly as well, so it's a good option for being able to hit him. The Morning Star Whip has the largest single target damage advantages, so that's a good option. You can use one of the other ones as well. Durandal will boost your minions a little more, for instance. The best strategy that I find personally for fighting Duke Fishron is to build a long asphalt bridge just above the ocean's surface, then use fast boots and wings. I like the amphibian boots because they definitely help you to take off quickly and take off a little higher with those tsunami tornado things that he does. So those are very useful. You can use other ones if you want, though. Be careful not to leave the ocean area because Duke Fishron will become enraged, and you don't like him when he's angry. You will definitely want the Master Ninja Gear. Definitely the Master Ninja Gear if you're fighting Duke Fishron for its dodging and damage avoidance capabilities. If you are mixing classes, if you don't mind mixing classes, and this is a good fight to mix them, in terms of non-summoner weapons, a good gun with Chlorophyte bullets is an excellent option because they will home in on him and he's moving quickly. It's going to make your life easier. If your aim is good enough to keep up with him, crystal bullets will do more damage. If you've defeated the Frost Moon or the Martian Madness, you can use the Chain Gun or the Xenopopper. Otherwise, Tactical Shotgun, Mega Shark, Uzi, Onyx Blaster, all good options as well. A powerful or multi-arrow bow, such as the Chlorophyte Shot Bow, can also work. The Stinger from Golem is a good option as well. The loot that you're looking for from Duke Fishron, mainly the Tempest Staff for a summoner. Tempest Staff summons a Sharknado that follows the player. It fires sharks at enemies. It's kind of comical, and they kind of just go splat when they hit enemies. So it's kind of funny, and it does do 50 base damage, so it's high damage. It's a 1 in 5 chance to drop from Duke Fishron. It's powerful but not very accurate. I believe it was boosted a bit in one of the updates as well. I'm not sure if that was 1.4.0 or 0.1. If you're in expert or master mode, he will drop the Shrimpy Truffle in the treasure bag every time, which summons the cute Fishron mount. So that is an excellent unlimited flight mount for any class. If you use it with a water-filled arena, or if you can dip it in liquid occasionally, you can actually use little bubbles of water or other liquid surrounded by clouds. You can even use honey. And that way, as long as there's a buff that it gets from being in water, and it keeps it being any liquid, and keeps it from being outside of the liquid after a little bit as well. So you can either do a completely water-filled arena or just dip it in every so often. The boost is higher if you're in water, though. And that allows you to swap out wings and boots for 2 extra accessories like any other mount, but the cute Fishron, under the right circumstances, can be very fast and even gives you some boosts as well. So that's one that I like from Duke Fishron, and one reason to fight him. Next up, though, the Old Ones Army Tier 3. This is totally optional as well, but you can now get upgraded sentries if you like sentries by farming the event and then buying them from the Tavern Keep. It's still a difficult event at this stage and is totally optional, so you can postpone it or ignore it completely. Spooky armor is still going to be your best option for fighting this event. If you can afford one of the better event armors from the Tavern Keep, those will boost your sentries very significantly. So specifically for this event, using one of those sentry-based loadouts that you get from the Tavern Keep that are from and for this event, you can swap to one of those at this stage. It is still a summoner thing, so that's an option as well. The Xeno Staff is the best choice as far as minions, although the Desert Tiger Staff and some other staffs can also work well. The Staff of the Frost Hydra still comes in very handy if you have it. It's possibly counted separately from the other sentries anyway, or possibly not. But anyway, while it is in terms of the mana for the event, will allow you to summon extras of the other sentries, but not the Frost Hydra. You can't summon like a ton of Frost Hydras, but it is still a good sentry, and it's still very useful in this event. The Dark Harvest Whip may be a good choice due to it helping to damage additional enemies, so it's going to help you take out those crowds. Accessories will still be similar to other post-Golem fights. Interestingly, the shiny stone that you get on Expert or Master mode from Golem can actually be helpful during this event because you can stop and heal with it every so often. Obsidian skin potions actually can be helpful for Wave 7 because Betsy will light you on fire, and Obsidian skin potions will save you from being on fire. So that's a little tip for this event. If you are going to use other non-summoner weapons, for the most part you want to use weapons that hit more than one enemy, but you will still also need powerful single target weapons for Betsy in particular, or at least one. The Tsunami with holy arrows, or Xenopopper with crystal or chlorophyte bullets, those are great options for this in general. The North Pole and the Snowman Cannon are also very good options. The Pulse Bow is good against the crowds in terms of the things coming out of the portals, but not so much against the bosses. In terms of loot, the main thing that you want from this event, although you are a summoner, if you're willing to use non-summoner weapons, the Betsy's Wrath from Betsy actually further lowers enemy defense. So it's a very useful drop if you're willing to use. It's technically a magic weapon, but it actually, it's like Ichor, but much bigger. It makes a much bigger drop in enemy defense. So as you get later in the game, of course, the enemies have higher defense, so it's very useful. Moving along, though, the Empress of Light. The Empress of Light is also an optional boss and can be very difficult. Most important item that you want from the Empress of Light as a summoner can only be obtained under particularly difficult circumstances. So let's talk about this. If you want to take on the Empress of Light, spooky armor will be best, although if you're fighting her during the day, which is how you get the drop that we're going to talk about, you might actually want to consider going all the way back to Hallowed Armor because of its Shadow Dodge, Holy Protection, actually it's called, ability. It used to be called Shadow Dodge when it was different, but anyway. Yeah, the Holy Protection ability of the Hallowed Armor is very useful if you're going to take on the Empress of Light during the day because it gives you a chance to not get killed. The Xeno Staff is arguably the ideal minion summon, but the UFOs can have movement issues with the Empress of Light, so either you'll need to move around to keep your UFOs on target, or you can use an alternative. The Sanguine Staff actually is a very good option for this fight, even though it's older, because it has better tracking and she moves around a lot and fast. So Sanguine Staff can be an excellent option as well. If you decide to do the fight a bit later after fighting the Stardust Pillar, which we're going to get to soon, you can also use the Stardust Cell Staff, actually, because those will attach things that will damage her constantly. Again, because she's moving quickly, you want to kind of have your damage track and follow her. So Stardust Cell Staff is a good option as well. The Morning Star Staff is definitely the best choice of whip if you can even hit her, because she's going to be hard to hit with a whip, but that's going to do a lot of damage. Again, even the Durandal could still work because of the extra summon tag damage. Accessories should otherwise be similar to the Duke Fishron fight. You're going to want that Master Ninja gear, very helpful. An Asphalt Bridge setup is also a similar idea for her. Fast wings, you can get the Fishron wings from Duke Fishron as well. Betsy's wings also are a good option. Amphibian boots, again, still an excellent option. Papyrus Scarab is something you're definitely going to want at this point. Necromantic Scroll as well. Pygmy Necklace, Celestial Shell, and any other emblems, your Summoner Emblem, all useful. If you have a fast flying mount, you could consider using it and swapping in more damage boost accessories, although it is going to be hard to keep up with her unless you have like the very fastest mounts. Like, again, Cute Fishron's a good option, the Witch's Broom potentially. But boots and wings will probably help you dodge more easily, so that's sort of trade-off there. Another alternative, though, is to build a long or looping minecart track. My friends and I did this in our fight, which I haven't even published yet. But anyway, you can use a minecart track with booster tracks for speed, and you will definitely want to use the mechanical cart if you are planning to use a minecart track. Of course, that's only available expert and master mode as well. For non-summoner weapons, a good gun with chlorophyte or crystal bullets, or a good bow like the Tsunami. The Flare-On can also work. The Snowman Cannon, any homing weapon can work well. Because, again, she moves around a lot and very quickly, and you basically just need to have things that can track her, or very good aim. Don't forget your Bewitching Table and Summoning Potions, along with your other buffs. You're going to need everything you can get against her. If you decide to fight her during the day, reforge your accessories to Menacing instead of Warding, because Warding's not going to help you. You're going to die in one hit. So if you're hell-bent on getting the Terra Prisma, fighting her during the day, reforge all your accessories to Menacing and kill her faster. In terms of loot, she drops the Kaleidoscope Whip, which is generally considered to be the best in the game, and that's the main reason as a summoner you may always want to fight her, whether you're willing to take her on during the day or not. If you can fight her while doing all of the damage only during the day, which means you have to you can potentially summon her before dawn and wait to start hurting her, but you want to give yourself as much time as possible. But all of the damage that you inflict has to be inflicted only during the day if you want to get the Terra Prisma. So yeah, you have to survive massively boosted attacks if you want to do this. You have to do all of your damage during the day when she's effectively enraged, and any hit that lands will kill you no matter what armor and so on you might have. But you can get one of the best summoner items in the game, the Terra Prisma Minion. And if you're willing to do that, again, you're going to want probably the Hallowed Armor. You're going to want your Master Ninja gear. You're going to want probably your Star Veil. Anything that gives you the ability to survive being hit regardless of damage. So defense is not going to help you, but things that help you survive hits. Brain of Confusion is going to help you there as well. So those are the kinds of things you're going to want to use if you want to fight her during the day, if you are bent on getting the Terra Prisma. It's going to be extremely difficult, even with all the best gear for that event, but that's kind of what you're going for if you want to try. Good luck to you. So, moving right along, though, the Lunatic Cultist. So, at this point, you're getting towards the very end of the game. You're going to still want your spooky armor, though, and ideally at this point, you want to get the Xeno Staff. You want to use the Xeno Staff unless you did manage to get that Terra Prisma from the Empress of Light. The Kaleidoscope from the Empress of Light is definitely the best whip from here on out. You're going to want to prioritize dodging and movement, and then minion and damage boosting accessories. So again, you can either go with fast boots and wings or use a mount for more damage boosting accessories, but you're going to be able to move and dodge a little faster if you're on foot. So that's your sort of trade-off. Honestly, to me, the Lunatic Cultist isn't that hard. You can use actually a relatively simple arena. You can use asphalt at the bottom if you like, or you can even just use platforms, maybe even stairs. You can get away with that kind of stuff. In terms of non-summoner weapons, although homing weapons take a damage reduction, they're still the best. So once again, a good gun with chlorophyte bullets is going to make your life a lot easier. The Flareon, the Snowman Cannon, or another good homing weapon can also work well. Again, if you're willing to mix classes. In terms of loot, the Lunatic Cultist doesn't drop much, but the Ancient Manipulator that the Lunatic Cultist does drop is very important. Put it somewhere safe. It's a crafting station, the Ancient Manipulator, which you will need for making endgame gear. So getting towards the end here, the Celestial Pillars, the Lunar Events. Loadout is still going to be your spooky armor and your Xenostaff ideally. Again, unless you got the Terra Prisma, and you're going to use that at least until you defeat the Stardust Pillar. And the Terra Prisma gives you a choice. If you got the Terra Prisma, the stuff you get from the Stardust Pillar is less important. But you're going to want to go for, probably as a summoner, the Stardust Pillar first, because it gives you some stuff that you're going to want as a summoner, but we'll get to that. So less emphasis is needed on movement speed for taking on the pillars, more on damage avoidance and minion and damage boosting. Arenas aren't really something that is going to work for the pillars either. You're not really going to have a chance to construct them anyway. The easiest strategy to use against the pillars is to stay near the edge of their zone. You can tell when the music and the background changes that you're near the edge of the pillar's zone, and you can just kind of sit there and pick off enemies. It used to be you would watch until you no longer see the red lasers shooting back at the pillar from the defeated enemies. You can still watch out for those if you like, but there's also now a blue-red health bar that'll show up at the bottom when you're near the pillar, and when the blue part is gone, the shield should be down. And whether you're watching the lasers and the lasers stop shooting back at the pillar, or you watch for that blue part of the health bar to go away, at that point the shield should be down and you can go attack the pillar. So a Nimbus Rod is actually remarkably useful against the pillar itself if you're willing to use a non-summoner weapon. Sentries can also be placed and continue to attack the pillar. Even if you leave the area, they should continue to attack it. Otherwise, you're going to want something that does a lot of damage quickly. Crystal bullets, holy arrows, something like that. At the start of the events, the Xeno Popper or Chain Gun will be good options to use. The Flareon and Vampire Knives can also still be useful. The North Pole, again, all that is if you're mixing classes. Phantasm Bow from the Vortex Pillar is an excellent choice once you get it. Vortex Beater is a great option as well. Solar Eruption from the Solar Pillar. Those are all, you know, if you're willing to mix classes, summon alternatives and weapon alternatives. You may want to wait to finish off the last of the 4 pillars to allow you to prepare to fight the Moon Lord, who will automatically spawn shortly after defeating the last pillar. So if you are mixing classes, you might take on the Nebula pillar last, since you likely won't be using magic weapons as a summoner, and that allows you to craft any of the weapons from the other pillars that you might need before you go on to fight the Moon Lord. But again, in terms of loot, for summoners, the most important loot is from the Stardust Pillar. So ideally, you want to defeat it first. You can craft then from the fragments that it drops, either the Stardust Cell Staff, which summons a Stardust Cell minion, which fires at range and can also teleport. It fires unavoidable mini cells, which latch onto the target and deal continual damage for 30 ticks. Its listed base damage is 60, but the mini cells can stack on an enemy for up to 100 damage per tick. And it is crafted from 18 Stardust Fragments at the Ancient Manipulator. You probably only have one, using the Stardust Fragments from the Stardust Pillar. The Stardust Dragon Staff is your alternative, and a lot of people prefer it. It summons a single Stardust Dragon, which instead of having multiple minions, each time you sort of summon it again, it actually grows in length. It adds segments to it, so it becomes a longer single dragon instead of more of them. It flies around, chases, and attacks enemies. Its listed base damage is 40, but actually its damage is far, far higher. It's possible to do thousands or even tens of thousands of damage per second with the Stardust Dragon in the right situation. Each added segment significantly boosts its damage, so if you're using it, use only it. Generally, use all of your summons to grow it to its maximum. And it is also 18 Stardust Fragments at the Ancient Manipulator. So again, between the two, you probably want the dragon, although there are circumstances where you might want to use the Stardust Cells. And there are also useful weapons from the other pillars, such as the Phantasm and Vortex Speeder from the Vortex pillar and the Solar Eruption from the Solar pillar. Those are good options if you're mixing classes. Moving right along, last but not least, certainly not least, is the Moonlord. So, going up against the Moonlord, at least the first time, you're still stuck with the spooky armor. But the Stardust Dragon Staff is kind of the go-to minion, unless you manage to get the Terra Prisma. So Terra Prisma does more damage with less range. Stardust Dragon has more range, so it's a choice. Stardust Cell Staff can be useful in certain mixed class weapons situations, depending what you're going for. Because again, the Stardust Dragon, you grow in length with all of your summons. If you're mixing things, and it might be different for you. But the Kaleidoscope Whip will come in very handy to boost whichever minions you choose. So you definitely want that Kaleidoscope Whip from the Empress of Light if possible. You can get away with another one if you chose not to fight her. Movement speed will be critical to avoid the Moonlord's powerful attacks. Defense is not going to help you much. So focus on movement speed and damage avoidance in terms of your accessories, and of course damage boosting, damage output in terms of, doing damage to the Moonlord. Boosting your minion, the number of minions, the damage, and you get the idea. Anyway, you have a choice of strategies to use against the Moonlord. One approach is to use the old asphalt bridge with fast boots and wings. If you're going this route, if you're playing expert or master difficulty, the soaring insignia from the Empress of Light is going to be very helpful to you because it allows you unlimited flight. So you can use that along with wings to give you unlimited flight. And that's definitely an option. Allows you to kind of fly around the beam and so on. Another approach to fighting the Moonlord is to use a fast flying mount. I like the cute Fishron if you can keep it wet. One way is to create a huge underwater arena and use the Celestial Shell, which allows you to avoid drowning and as well gives you lots of good boosts. So if you're willing to take the time to flood a huge area, and you'll probably want to use clouds as the barrier on the edges of your underwater arena, because you're going to need a huge area and it's going to take a long time if you want to use that strategy. Bubble blocks, rather. Yeah, not clouds, bubble blocks. You trap an area of liquid that way. So you can either fill a huge area with bubble blocks on the side and flood the whole thing, or you can, again, create little puddles, floating puddles. Again, you can even use honey inside of them. The mount is faster when fully submerged, but it's still quite fast if you dip it into puddles frequently, or you can even just wait for it to rain, and that will also work with the cute Fishron. Other alternatives, the Witch's Broom is fairly quick as well. For instance, you can use another flying mount if you want to. Other than movement, you're going to want to prioritize damage avoidance, extra minions, damage boosting in that order, probably. The Master Ninja Gear is essential, especially if you're on foot, and the Star Veil is actually useful again here as well for damage avoidance. Again, the Worm Scarf, the Brain of Confusion, those kind of things can also help damage avoidance. If you want non-summoner weapons, if you're willing to mix, a good gun with chlorophyte or crystal bullets can work well. A good bow can also work well. The Phantasm bow from the Vortex pillar is my preferred option personally, and you would probably use that with Ichor or Venom arrows because those are quick and don't require an accessory to be quick. The Vortex Beater and Solar Eruption, also great choices. Again, Betsy's Wrath can be very useful for lowering the Moonlord's defense, and Ichor also potentially useful. You can use a flask of Ichor or whatever to combine with your whips to, again, lower Moonlord's defense, which increases your damage, which allows you to kill him off faster. So you may, though, want to use your whip to boost your minions. So again, Flask of Ichor is going to work well with your whip, and at the same time you're boosting your minions, so that kind of combines very well. And don't forget your buffs and potions. You'll probably need them for this fight. You can even craft a few super healing potions if you have some extra fragments from all 4 pillars. And you can quickly do that before he spawns. Super healing potions are going to be useful as well. And potentially you can set the nurse up somewhere nearby, but not in the way for the fight. So you can set up a bed, teleport back to the nurse, quickly heal, run before he kills her. And that's a potential strategy too. And you can combine that obviously with the other things. What you're going to get from the Moonlord, the Lunar Portal Sentry Staff is one possible drop. He has a number of possible drops that each have a chance. So there's a few, there's a couple that are summoner related. The Lunar Portal summons a floating portal which fires a sweeping beam at enemies, lasts 2 minutes, does a 50 base damage, 1 in 9 chance to drop, because he will drop 1 out of 9 things. Rainbow Crystal Staff is another possibility, deals high damage from an area effect, has like a delayed explosion effect and beam graphics. It's kind of interesting. You kind of have to see it, but it lasts for 2 minutes, 150 base damage, but because there's a delay on those explosion effects, it can make it a little bit less useful, and it depends what you're fighting for how useful it is, how fast the enemies move. So likewise, 1 in 9 chance. It's 1 of 9 things he can drop. And there are also other nice non-summoner weapons that he can drop: the Meowmere, the Star Wrath, the Terrarian, the SDMG, and so on. Summoner, or sort of the Celebration Mark II, I think he drops now. Anyway, there's also some stuff you can craft after defeating the Moonlord, and that includes the Stardust Armor, which gives you +5 minions, so the greatest boost to the number of minions of any armor set in the game, does a total of 66% boosted minion damage, and also gives you a free Stardust Guardian minion, which doesn't account towards your minion cap. The Stardust Guardian is passive until activated. You activate it by double tapping down, and it guards a small area. Actually, I think that's changed with one of the 1.4 updates. I didn't update my notes here. But yeah, the Stardust Guardian chases nearby enemies and damages them with explosions. Enemies will target it. It sort of draws their aggro, so enemies will target the Stardust Guardian rather than you. It does not use a minion slot. The armor is crafted from 36 Luminite bars and 45 Stardust fragments at the Ancient Manipulator, so yes, you still need that if you want that. And basically, Stardust armor is the ultimate summoner minion armor set in the game. And now you've won. So I hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.